You know I can't stand the producer versus beatmaker conversation, but on an episode of the Joe Budden Podcast with Muni Long, she calls out beatmakers not for not being producers, but for not being musicians.
Again, a lot of the newer producers are not musicians, and so they don't have the chord progressions.
So producers versus musicians. A lot of producers aren't musicians, at least not in a traditional sense, at least not in the sense of having studied music theory. And does that mean that producers, that we are at fault for the lack of musicality in modern day music? Ooh, this is a conversation. Are you ready to have this conversation? Let's have it. In the full episode, we also talk about some controversy that 50 Cent stirred up. The link is below to that. But drop a comment. Are producers and musicians necessarily different things? Because, you know, a lot of producers are musical, beat makers are musical, even if they don't necessarily know theory, even if they aren't musicians at the highest level of musicianship, right? Like, you don't have to be a virtuoso to make a great song, or a classic beat for that matter. Is that good or bad? Dame thinks it's bad. I don't know how I feel. I don't think it's either. Curious to hear what you think. Drop a comment. Appreciate you watching. Thank you for tuning in.
What do you think about the death of the bridge in R&B songs?
I just think that, first of all, again, a lot of the newer producers are not musicians, and so they don't have the chord progressions, loops. Like a lot, you know, people are actually not playing these chords. They're going on splice and putting the chords together.
You gotta go to church, man.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of these niggas need to go to church.
Shout out to Imani also. So she said a lot. She said a whole lot about the whole industry, about artists, about producers, about their respective skill sets. What were your initial reactions? Because I have a lot to say about this.
I think she has a very intricate understanding of the landscape of the music industry. To me, it speaks to a lack of professionalism, if you will, that's so present because there are easy ways to get to things. There are ways to manufacture a sound and an idea and words and to manipulate things without having to actually study and learn. And so for me, as a consumer who cares so much, I really resonate with what she's saying. But for some people, they may be like, yo, I don't care. I'm just trying to vibe, you know? So I'm not saying that what she's saying equals truth for everyone. I'm saying unprofessional because when I consider myself a music exec or a professional at something, I want to be well-versed and well-rounded, not in just the subject matter, but all things around it. So for me as a music executive, I think even that term is limiting. I'm great at business. I'm a business executive. I happen to be iterating to most of y'all in the music industry, but I have companies in other industries. I started in another industry, and I will continuously evolve as a business person. And so I think that's what she's talking about, to be honest, is just really well-rounded, dynamic people who are studied and honed versus people who are jumping into something because it's accessible and they perfect the simplicity of their system. And now they're a producer, you know, and you've talked about it, Payne, how it's beat makers versus producers. I'm with Dame. I don't want to pit people against. I'm not saying that I prefer one or the other. I know a couple of people who just started producing within the last year, sound incredible, don't know music theory. I know people who know music theory and they're way too inside of their head and can't produce a solid track. I also know dudes who went to multiple years of college, went to church, now can make every arrangement. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. I am saying that if this is where you choose to dive in, I really agree with her that calling yourself an A&R, calling yourself a producer, and not being well-versed and well-techniqued and well-equipped to do what you're saying that you do well, I think is a disservice to the overall creative scene because it's begetting laziness and things that I don't think should be added into the music, which is more about politics and does this person like this or can I emulate this thing versus can I be an original and bring something diverse and incredible here. But shout out to Muni Long. I think she's a genius. She's been a writer for years before she was an artist and still writing, still revolutionizing the music industry. And I really appreciate her perspective for sure.
And she can really write. She wrote Timber and then turned around and did a Rihanna song. So she can really, really, really write. And I like what she's saying because it's so harsh it's a lot of direct shots at a lot of people, but they're not fatal wounds because she's not saying them out of a place of malice. She's just matter of factly saying this is what it is. And I think, especially and I'm glad Joe Budden brought up the death of the bridge, because that really, that's something that I think about as a music producer all the time. Bridges are hard. I'm not going to lie. I just feel happy that I produced the whole track for Jaheim and it had a bridge and everything. And I'm like, wow, I actually wrote a bridge. That's amazing. And it, it's not easy, but it comes with a lot of music theory. You have to get into the bridge and then exit out of the bridge gracefully back into some people that's second nature. That's why Imani was talking about church at the end, because a lot of people just have that experience because they've been playing. And you know how the church players, it's amazing what they can do. Just turn on a dime and their music theory is second nature. It's like breathing to them. But a lot of us producers don't have that. And I don't want to talk about, you've heard me criticize the beat maker versus producer conversation, and I still think it's a stupid distinction. What Muni Long did was she didn't make that distinction. She made the producer versus musician distinction, because you can be a producer without being a musician. Diddy is not a musician. He doesn't play an instrument. He's a producer, though. You know what I mean? There are a lot of producers.
Wild person to reference right now, Payne.
Well, that's why I did it, because that could be seen as insulting, and I don't really feel bad if Diddy gets insulted right now. It's the least of his worries. There is a distinction, because you can make an amazing beat and not be a quote unquote musician in a traditional sense, and that's fine. I don't see Muni Long as criticizing modern day producers, because that's not what hip hop culture revolutionized a lot of things. And it took away the ivory tower sort of Eurocentric traditionalism of music and created something that has now been incorporated, appropriated, however you want to say it, back into, the wider landscape of music. We have turntablists at, playing with symphonies. So everything eats itself and consumes itself in the creative world. So I think all of that is fine. She referenced Splice. She really knows what's going on, and I really feel like she is a part of every process. The guy who produced Hours and Hours is Dylan Graham. I've made a lot of beats with him. I've been in the studio with him. He's a great beat maker. Don't get me wrong. His beats are amazing. He taught himself piano by watching YouTube videos, learned every chord in a single key, and then just transposes based on the project. So one could look at him and say, oh, you're not a real musician. That's neither here nor there. He can write a bridge. You know what I mean? That's Muni Long's breakout solo hit. So there's not any, I don't look at it as shade. When a lot of people say I'm not throwing any shade, they definitely are insulting and disrespecting people. Muni Long was not. She was just speaking on the way things work. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that's where we are in music. I think the pendulum is always going to swing, because R&B used to be R&B. It used to have a bridge. It used to have crazy chord changes. It was very connected to gospel. Now it's more connected to rap. And she brought up drip and vibe, and she's kind of showing her age. I thought she was way younger. She's aging amazingly. But, I think the pendulum is going to swing, and we're just not there yet. But I think ultimately, it's not because people get sick of this and that. It's just the nature of music. Producers right now, we're making what we're making, but in the future, something's going to change and people are going to want more, and musicality and being more musical is going to start to take precedence over what we value now. Nothing wrong. It's not good or bad. It's just how it is.
I think it's bad. I'm just like, I think the quality of music has definitely gotten worse. There's more people just kind of rushing into the space, obviously rushing out songs, some of these songs are working for the moment. But there's a reason why, like, a lot of the classic songs still stream very well, right? I think there's something in the music and the way that it was put together and the care of why it lives. I don't think we're getting as many songs today that will play 10, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. But there are a lot of songs right now that are streaming very well because they've held up. And I think it's because it has the ingredients that Muni Long is talking about that's missing in a lot of songs today.